Welcome. This is part 2 of the Nativity Shepherds tutorial. Today we're going to be working through the shepherd's robes, so let's get stitching. With the sheep done, now we get to work on our shepherds, and we're going to do their robes first. Now if we look at our little sample, you can see that they're the reverse of each other. This one's got light body and then darker along the edge, and this one's darker body and light along the edge. We're going to start with the darker edge of this guy first. So if we go to our diagram, we can find right here that we're going to be doing stem stitch with 6 strands, and we're going to use 3, 7, 8, 2. So I have 3, 7, 8, 2 on my needle, and oh, I have not tied a knot at the end. I will tie a knot at the end, and then we're going to work on stem stitch. Now the beauty of this is that we're going to work from the center out. So this line right here is mostly just a guideline because we're going to work from here over, making 4 lines of stem stitch. And then if we happen to line up with this line, great. And if you don't, do not worry about it. Our goal is to get the 4 stem stitches to sit, 4 lines of stem stitches to sit close together. And when we do, it's going to make the edge of this robe look like it's braided. So we're going to start right up here at the neck, right at the top, and make stem stitch going down. So I'm going to pull my thread up, and then I'm going to pull my loops to the left the whole way down. You want to keep a consistent direction. So I'm going to make a good longish stitch here going down on the line, keeping a loop up to the left. And then I'm going to come up in the middle of the space, right along that line, and pull until my thread sits right there, snugly on the fabric. Then I'm going to, again, pull my thread out of the way. And this time, I like to think of it as a half stitch length from the end of this previous stitch to my needle, or a full stitch length from where the thread is coming from. I'll go down, keeping my loop to the side. I'll then come up in the middle. I like to come up right next to that previous stitch, and then we pull until the thread is snug to the fabric. And then we're just going to continue all the way down, making consistent sized stitches. Oh, I think I got a knot. Nope, just a little tangle. Whew. I'm going to make sure that I don't have any tangles in my thread that I missed. And I'm going to keep stitching all the way to the bottom, and then I will check in and tell you what's going to happen next. All right. We've made it to the bottom of our line, and now we have to reverse the process going back up. Now the crucial part to make this second row, make the other half of what will look like a braid, is for us to continue pulling our loops the same direction as we now work bottom to top. So that whole first way down, I pulled my loops to the left. So I'm going to continue to pull my loops to the left. And I'm going to go down, not smushed next to that first row, but a little bit out from it. Give it just a little bit of breathing room. And then I'm going to come up, and I'm going to try and come up level with the stitch end before. You can kind of see where those needle points are. Not a big deal, but a little bit helpful if you can get close to it. And I'm going to pull this down to the fabric, and then I repeat. Again, I can see that my needle point is right here from before, and so I'll go down in that same general area, pulling to the left like I did on the first, up in the middle, and now that I have a few done, you can see that this starts to look like a braid with the plaits going into each other. I'm going to continue to the top, and then I'll repeat 4 lines, 3, and then 4 back up. I've made it to the bottom of line 3, and I'm going to start line 4 on my way back up, but I wanted to talk about what happens when you get to this sheep's head. So in line 3, I hit it, and as when I come to it, I'm just going to go down right underneath it, and then you're going to come up on the other side. And then I used these stitches here as a guide for where to go down and make that final stitch. For example, we're going to do the same thing on this side, and I can see that my first stitch is right about here from these previous rows. So I'm going to go down right about there, but I want this to look like stem stitch and not just a back stitch. So I'm also still going to come up in the middle and pull down, but then I'm going to go down at this same point or a little bit to the side and go under the sheep, maintaining that stem stitch look. And then I'm going to repeat for the top side. I'm going to come up right here, close to the head as I can get it. And then I'm going to say, probably going to jump up to this stitch right here. So I'm going to go down about there, level with that other stitch, and then come up here in the middle, and then continue on my merry little way. And you can see here at the bottom and here in the middle that I'm going to be a little bit inside my line here, and I'm probably going to touch it right here up at the top. And all of that is fine, because the goal is going to be achieved of having 4 lines of stem stitch across. So I'm going to keep stitching, and then I will check in. I've finished the left-hand side and I'm working on the right-hand side, and I'm just running out of thread now. Don't worry if you ran out sooner than me. And I want to show you how you change strands of thread while working with stem stitch, because we've got overlapping stitches, so it can be a little bit confusing. So I'm going to pull down here for my last stitch, and I'm going to anchor, and I'm just going to slide my needle underneath some of the stitches on the back. And then what we're going to do is we're going to slide our needle out underneath our stitch here like we would have if we didn't stop. So we can do this one of 2 ways. First, you could just kind of finagle your needle out towards the side. From the bottom, I'm coming up towards the side like this. But if you happen to be struggling and catching or splitting threads like I did there, we don't want to do that. So your second choice is I can come up here to the right-hand side because it's open and clear, and I can pull my thread up, and then I can just slide my needle back underneath this stitch. Because remember, I've been pulling all of my stitches to the left, so I want my needle to be coming out to the right. And now I'm set up to continue stitching. Another thing I want to point out, here as you get to the bottom, and especially this first bottom on this right-hand side, I ended here, right here where I'm supposed to, but then my next stitch when I came up is a full stitch length lower. Because of this steep angle right here, when my next line ends, it'll probably end right about here if we follow that line down. And then my next, when it starts again, line 4, will probably be at the bottom. So we're talking really big difference here at the bottom. So just follow the line of stitching with your eyes. And when you need to come back up, if you're struggling to find where to go, I like to put my needle in and kind of angle it and see where I'm going. Because you can see if I put it right here, right next to the bottom stitch, I have to smush all these stitches out of the way. And my needle has a really hard time getting that direction, as opposed to down here, if I poke it in, it lays nice and flat next to the stitches the whole way up. So I'm going to finish all of this, and I'll jump over, switch colors, and stitch on this shepherd. And here is my other shepherd finished. This one was in 613, and this one only has 3 lines of stem stitch instead of 4 like over here. So just make sure you only do 3 and not 4. If you are working on the cute little ornament-sized version of this hoop. There are a couple things that are different between the two. There are 2 lines here on the edge of the shepherd and 2 lines here on the edge of the shepherd instead of the 3 and 4 in the original. Then we're ready to do the chain stitch for the body of both of these shepherds. We're going to start on this guy because it's a little bit easier there to start with. So we're going to be using the 613 that we used here. We're going to be using 3 strands instead of 6 strands. We're going to use chain stitch to fill in the body. Now we're going to start at the bottom over here, chain stitch up to the top, kind of anchor off, and then we'll go back down, skip his head, kind of fill in a little bit here as we go, and then we'll repeat. We'll go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, filling in the space. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. So to make chain stitch, we're going to come up, we're going to do the same thing we did for the ears, but instead of making one detached chain, we're going to make chains into each other. So I'm going to pull up, then I'm going to go down at close to the same point, making sure I don't catch my knot on the back. Holding my loop up out of the way, and I'm going to come up through the loop and pull. If you ever have a knot or pull the wrong direction and your chain stitch gets pulled the wrong way, you're just going to get your needle, or even better, the eye of your needle, because you can't get caught as easily with that, and just pull this loop back up until you have the space to then pull your thread through how you want to. Now we're going to go back down at our up point inside of the loop instead of anchoring, because we're making a line of chain stitch instead of detached chain stitch. So we're going to pull down and then come up right on that line, and really 2 times in a row. There we go. Pull up the way we're going. Now I'm pretty sure that what my problem is right now is this kind of twisted funky end is getting caught as I'm pulling things through. So I'm just going to snip this off clean and hope that that helps my next couple stitches here. Now you obviously want to do your best to try and keep these as consistent as possible, but don't worry if your stitch lengths vary a little bit. Just keep working all the way up this left-hand side of the shepherd. Here I am at the top. I'm going to anchor this last stitch by going down on the outside of my last chain. And I'm actually going to take this kind of all the way up here a little bit longer than I might normally do, just to make sure I fill in this whole line of his robe. Then we're just going to start up again, kind of coming down into this first open space. And I don't want to be too super close to these stem stitches because the chain stitch gets wider. We're starting in the middle, and then you see here where it wraps around, it's wider. So I don't want to be too close. I want to give it just a little bit of space, not even a full needle's width, but just a little bit of space. And then I'm going to go back down in the same place or close to it. And then I struggle to come up through my loop and space my stitches evenly. Not quite sure why that is. So I like to pull my loop to the side. So feel free to play around with how you make chain stitch. You might find that moving your loop to a different location or holding your hoop a different way makes the stitch easier to do. I know that it took me a while to figure out exactly how I liked to make chain stitch. So I'm just going to continue like this to the bottom, and I'll check in. All right, I am down here by the sheep's head, and I can see that my full stitch length would probably take me to right about here into the sheep's head, which I don't want to do. So instead of finishing the full stitch and having it look short and kind of funky, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a straight stitch down right here to the side a little bit through the sheep's head. And then I'm going to come back up through my chain stitch. And then go down on the other side, pretending like this chain stitch disappears under his head rather than finishes at the head and causes some funky looking problems. Now, we will make one last chain to finish off right here, or maybe even just 2 stitches, I think. My chain stitch looks like it's a little bit longer than this space I've got here. I'm just gonna follow that same method, make 2 stitches right here kind of close together. And then I'm gonna jump back over here and start the whole process again. Now, again, chain stitches are wider than your needle. So you can see here that my needle is coming up next to this line of stitches, and there's a little bit of space around it. You want to make sure that your needle isn't like eating these stitches when you come up, or you're going to be too close and you will have smushed chain stitches instead of happily lying next to each other chain stitches. Right, as you add more here, this angle is going to get too tight to have a full chain stitch in there, but there's still going to be this like little triangle that's not full of anything. So what you're going to do is you'll make your chain stitch, but then instead of trying to fill in this triangle, I'm just going to take my needle up farther away and slide it under one of these neighboring stitches, and then it just disappears like magic. And then coming back out, some of the same might be happening as well. So I'm going to put my first needle point all the way up here. And then I might put my second one down a little bit lower instead of right next to each other to help fill this space before I make my next chain stitch down. A little bit bigger. That's good. And then I'm just going to keep filling in this way until this entire side is full. And then at some point, I think these are all going to end up being down ones. So I might just fill in a couple down here and make sure that I have like the head, the top of a chain pointing down at some point so it feels like more than just straight stitches at the bottom. To change thread for chain stitch, this is my second time for the record. My first was up here in a handy little corner. We're just gonna anchor off the other side of the chain stitch like we would for the top of the row and a detached chain, and then I'm gonna anchor on the back. We're gonna come up through this chain and then I'm gonna go down inside the chain, and both of these stitches are going to cover up my little anchor stitch I made right here to hold the chain in place while I change thread. And then I get to come up just like I normally would, make the chain stitch, and that little anchor disappears. And then I'll just continue stitching and we'll be on our way to finishing some of the shepherd. I finished this shepherd's both sides on this right hand side. You're going to start from the bottom next to the staff instead of up here where they meet. All right, so this first line goes all the way up and then we go all the way back down here, just following the same method we did on the first side, making sure to stop at the top and come down, and then any little bits in these top tight angles that can't fit a whole stitch, you put just a single straight stitch. And then I jumped over to this kneeling shepherd, and his body is 3782, which is the darker color from here. And on this one, you're going to start over here next to the sheep, and you follow this line up to the top, and then you follow down through his kneeling knees back to the sheep, and then we repeat this process. Now, the tricky part on this shepherd is that we want to kind of smooth out this kneeling corner here. We don't want it to look like the lines go straight down and then this way. Not like another corner. I want it to, not like another corner. The idea is for it to look a little more rounded and then smooth out a little bit as it works its way into the center. You can see here from our picture that these become more gentle curves as we go. And that's gonna have to be an intentional choice on your part. So what's probably gonna happen is you're gonna end up with a little gap or two along the way, and that's totally fine. What we're gonna do is first, I need to make one more stitch, I think, before I get there. So I'm gonna make this not last, but make another stitch here. And you can see that I'm choosing to go a little farther away from this last line of stitching rather than right up close to it. This is gonna help make the curve more gentle. Also, making smaller stitches will help make the curve more gentle because you have more control over what's going on. So I'm gonna stop here real quick while I have my thread. Here, anchor that stitch down. And I'm gonna jump back over to this line in between these two. Let's get my shine, there we go. You can see my needle now. In between these two lines. This first stitch or so, there's really only one width of thread there. So I'm just gonna make a straight back stitch. And then I'm gonna come over here and make another stitch to fill in this space and then evaluate and see how things are looking. Other than me pulling that a little too tight. So now you can see that these stitches kind of blend in and we no longer have a gap in the corner. So you could choose to fill in these stitches as you go, or at the end, once you've made all of the chain stitches, come back and fill in anything that's going on in the corner. I'm gonna keep stitching my way through and I will check in at another important part in the shepherd kneeling here. All right, I've added a few more rows, and this is going to be your landmark for a little change you're gonna make. So I've filled in going up and then back down until about the top of this sheep's head. You kind of see this L I've got right here. This is going to be your last curved downward shape. It was 7 rows for me this time. My previous time was about 8. So somewhere in that realm, you're gonna get hit about the top of the sheep's head. And we're gonna change how we stitch at this point. So we can see that the rest of our lines are upward lines. So we're not gonna make any more lines going down this way. I'll start my next line, because I just finished right here at the sheep's head. I'll start my next line here and go up, and then I'll jump back down and go up for the rest of them, filling in this space, kind of making diagonals into the corner. This is gonna help preserve this kneeling lines across the shepherd and help it look a little bit different than just meeting in the middle. So I'm gonna work on that and then we'll check in again. All right, I have finished all of my chain stitches for the shepherd. I'm gonna come back now at this point and fill in some of these gaps in the knee. I'm not fully pleased with all of those spaces. I decided it might be a little more efficient if I came back all at once to finish them. Point is, chain stitch is done, and now we can move on to the last 2 steps of the shepherd's body. One would be adding the gold. Let me grab our little guy sample, it'll be better. One is adding the gold here, and the other is adding these little accent stripes that fill in the rest of the body. So We're going to start with a single strand of 0.6 on our needle so that we can fill in the center with the stripes first before we do the gold. It's significantly easier to do it that way. So I'm going to start on our standing shepherd here, and I'm going to start kind of right here in this top third space. And I'm going to make a horizontal stitch straight across. And the way that I'm going to figure out it's horizontal is I'm going to hold it just like this. And I'm going to say, does that feel horizontal? And you know what? It kind of does. So I'm going to take my needle tip and put it just directly underneath this strand, push it in, and pull it down. And then I'm going to come up on this side that I just came down, sticking close to the edge. And I want about a needle's width between this stripe and the next one. So you can test with your needle and see how far apart they are. This feels pretty good to me. I'm feeling like the space above my needle is about the same size as the needle. Oh, and I just slid it under. That's tricky. Don't do that. There we go. I'll pull this up and then I'll repeat the process. I'll slide this across here and put my needle directly under the tip there and pull it down. Now these don't have to be exact, so don't worry if you get off a little bit, but just do your best to keep them nice and horizontal and have the ends go under these edges here. All right, the reason I just unpicked those, one, they were not particularly even, but two, I don't want any stitch sitting right on this black line for the kind of scoop neck of this undershirt, because it will make the back stitch lines harder. So I'm trying again, and I'm gonna intentionally come a little closer and go under, or go a little bigger and go where I could split it in half. That's feeling a little bit better, like there's a little bit of breathing room. So I'm gonna go with that. Try not to make it crooked. Now we need to come up to the side and we're going to span the distance. So I'm going to make one shorter stitch first on this side. Then I'm going to come up on this other side and check to see where I'm at, to see if this feels like a nice straight line across. I'm feeling like that's pretty good. So then I'll go down on this side and then I'll repeat. Coming up to see if that's a good place for the stripe to be. And then I'll check on this side. If that feels good. And then I'll go down over here. Then I'm going to finish the top of this undershirt by making a line of backstitch along this top U shape here. So I'm going to make a straight stitch along the line, and then I'm going to come up that kind of same stitch length down the line, pull my thread all the way up, and then I'm going to go down into the end of the previous stitch, or right at the end, I should say, of the previous stitch, and then we repeat. After I finish on this side, I'm going to repeat this process for the kneeling shepherd. The only difference is where we backstitch, because this guy is kneeling over there on the right, so his undershirt is in a different location than this one. So while my needle's on the top, I'm going to make all the horizontal stitches here for this shepherd, and then I'll make a line of backstitch all the way along this exterior edge of the shepherd. So that's horizontal stitches right in here, and then backstitch all along the edge to finish this second shepherd. And then we will talk about where our gold stitching goes. All right, with the stripes finished, we now get to add the gold. So we're gonna add gold all along the inside of our standing robe and between the chain stitch and stem stitch on the kneeling robe. So I have 3 strands of 3829 on my needle, and we're just gonna make a back stitch. So I'm gonna start with the standing shepherd, and I'm just gonna come up right here at the top, right between, well, not between, next to the stem stitch. Pull my thread all the way up, and then we're just gonna go down following this line, making a straight stitch, and then coming back up using a similar stitch length. Figuring out what's going on in the back. There we go. And down at the end of the previous stitch. And we'll just continue on our merry little way down the shepherd. We want to keep these stitches fairly close into the stem stitch. We aren't trying to make anything bigger here or wider, just trying to add a little accent to our shepherds. I'm gonna follow this line all the way through here to the bottom because we're following this left side of the robe, which is like folded over the right hand side of the robe. So it's gonna go all the way down through here, and then I'll pick up my gold here to go back up for the right hand side. Now for the kneeling shepherd, we're gonna make a line of stitching between the chain stitches and the stem stitch, which means that I'm gonna come up right here at kind of the intersection between the 2 lines, or you could start from the bottom if that feels better to you. And I'm just gonna put my needle down in between the stitches. And I'm just gonna try not to pull my thread too hard as I make these back stitches, and allow this gold to create a line that kind of sits on top of more than in between the stitches. So I'm not trying to get the thread all the way down to the fabric. I'm letting it rest in or on those stitches, which is not too difficult. Just make sure you're not cranking the thread down all the way to the fabric, and you will be just fine. So I'll make this line of backstitch all the way to the bottom of this robe, and then we'll be ready to move on to finish the headscarves and the shepherd's hook, and we will be done with this shepherd hoop. This is the end of part 2 of our shepherd's tutorial. Check back in for part 3 and we will finish our hoop.